The United States women's soccer team is the most successful team in the Women's World Cup history. Since the Women's World Cup was founded in 1991, the United States has won 3 out of the 7 championships, something no other team has done. The excellence of the women's U.S. soccer team is obvious, but what could be said about the men's team? Since the Men's World Cup founding in 1931, the men's team has not won a single championship. They haven't even been a runner-up. Yes, the team is skilled, and this topic isn't meant to take that away from them, but objectively compared to the rest of the world, they are far behind. So, what's the problem? Players on the men's U.S. soccer team earn higher salaries than the players on the women's U.S. soccer team. It isn't by a small amount either. In most recent World Cups, when calculated accordingly, Tim Howard, the U.S. goalie, earned a total of $400,000, while Hope Solo, the women's U.S. goalie, earned only $240,000. This statistic is based off U.S. soccer's salaries. So what about FIFA? Are they guilty of similar unfair treatment? The answer to that question is yes. FIFA awarded $9 million prize money to the men's team for losing in the 16th round of the most recent tournament, while the women were only awarded $2 million for winning the entire World Cup. Now, in some cases, inequalities such as this can be explained. For example, although a WNBA team may be more successful than an NBA team, there is a greater demand for the NBA, thus they make more money. The kicker here is that the demand for the U.S. women's soccer team is greater than that of the men. The Women's World Cup Championship versus Japan in 2015 was the most viewed soccer game in U.S. history. They also frequently sell out stadiums, as do the men's team. So, why is this the case? Since the women are more successful than the men and more popular, why do the men still make so much more money? There are 2 main root causes for this: institutionalized oppression and economic inequality. Economic inequality is the gap between the amount of money a group has or makes compared to another group. In this project, economic inequality comes in the form of the gender wage gap. The gender wage gap is the difference in salary between men and women who do the same job. Institutionalized oppression, on the other hand, is the systematic mistreatment of a particular social group simply because they belong to that group. Institutionalized oppression comes in many forms. Some of the most common forms of institutionalized oppression are racism, sexual preference discrimination, religious discrimination, and in the case of this project, gender discrimination. Why do FIFA and U.S. soccer participate in institutionalized oppression and economic inequality? There are 2 answers to this question. The first answer is the stigma of female inferiority that has existed for ages, particularly in the sports world. U.S. women's soccer is clearly not the first instance of having institutionalized oppression or an unfair gender wage gap. FIFA and U.S. soccer also weren't the first ones to start treating women unfairly in sports. They are simply following a history of unfair treatment done by previous institutions in the past. This is how, even though the women are more successful than the men, FIFA and U.S. soccer are thinking, oh, these women, we can't possibly pay them more than the men because they have always been worse than the men. These institutions are simply following a stigma cast upon women's sports that goes back to before Title IX and continues to last today. For those who don't know what Title IX is, it's an educational amendment that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in any federally funded education program or activity. This amendment was passed in 1972. Before this, women had very few opportunities, if any, to play organized sports. Men's teams in high schools and colleges played normally, while women's teams couldn't exist because no one would fund them. After Title IX passed, opportunities for women to play sports improved, but they were not nearly close to being fixed. The stigma that sports are meant for men continued to last, and today it prevails in institutions like U.S. soccer and FIFA. Let's expand on this subject. The gender wage gap isn't the only remnant of the stereotype caused by previous inequality. There are numerous examples. Like the girls' high school teams of today are forced to, the U.S. women's soccer team is forced to use worse facilities than the men. Here are some tweets from players on the women's team that show this. The men's U.S. team has never once been forced to play on turf. They have always played on the norm for professional soccer, grass. The tweet from Hope Solo of her lifting a turf panel is from when the women's team was scheduled to play in Honolulu for a qualifier. As a result of Hope Solo's tweet, the match was canceled. An incident like this has never happened before for a men's U.S. team. In 2014, players from teams around the world came together with their representatives to meet with FIFA in order to fix and replace turf stadiums with grass, all while providing companies willing to install grass. FIFA declined to meet with their representatives and all efforts went nowhere. Okay, let's pause for a moment and try something. See if you can guess which person said this quote regarding women's soccer. Quote, let the women play in more feminine clothes like they do in volleyball. They could, for example, have tighter shorts. Know who it is? That lovely quote was by Sepp Blatter, the president of FIFA. Thankfully, Blatter, who was the president of FIFA for 17 years, was banned from FIFA for 8 years in December 2015 due to unrelated economic corruption. Once you realize that a guy like this was the president of FIFA less than a year ago, it's not surprising that women are mistreated under FIFA. I made an interview with my mom, who's an expert in women's sports, but I didn't have time to include it. She played in high school, college, professionally, and is an Olympian and member of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. I linked the video in the description for time's sake, so if you want to learn more about this subject and see some first-hand experiences, you can watch it another time. Now on to the second answer to the original question. Why do FIFA and US soccer participate in economic inequality, specifically the gender wage gap? The answer to this question has somewhat already been answered. The gender wage gap is an example of institutionalized oppression. The same reason why these institutions have an unfair wage gap is the same reason why they participate in institutionalized oppression. They are buying into a stereotype that women deserve less than men, and they play into this stereotype in the form of economics by paying the women lower salaries and by not properly funding their expenses. The reason why economics play such a large role in this is because of capitalism and scarcity. Scarcity is the limited resources available in order to achieve something. Although both FIFA and US soccer are very rich, their money is not unlimited. The poor treatment of women in these companies is not because FIFA and US soccer want what's worse for women, it's because they care more about the men, which is obviously unethical, but still true. A capitalist society is one in which independent business owners control a state's wealth rather than the state controlling the wealth. FIFA and US soccer are capitalist enterprises. They are not federally funded, therefore, they are not forced to follow Title IX. Title IX only includes federally funded institutions such as state colleges and public high schools. The Catholic social teachings' understanding of social justice is violated by FIFA and US soccer. The Catholic social teachings encourage challenging the roots of injustice and oppression, empowering all people to live to their potential, and building social solidarity. FIFA and US soccer do none of these things. Do FIFA and US soccer encourage challenging the roots of injustice and oppression? No, they are a source of injustice and oppression to women. Do they empower all to live to their potential? No, they don't let female athletes live to their potential. They give women a poorer opportunity to succeed by letting them play in poorer conditions and by paying them much less money. Do they build social solidarity, or in other words, do they help bring the world together for a greater good? Yes, actually, but not when relating to gender inequality. Having teams from all around the world compete in the same tournament for a greater good of the players and the fans is the definition of solidarity. But by treating the players differently because of their gender, that's dividing men and women. So, who's trying to make a change about all this? In March 2016, the women's U.S. team's captains representing the entire team filed a lawsuit for wage discrimination against the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Also, Moya Dodd, a former Australian Olympian and female employee for FIFA, exposed FIFA for not giving women fair rights within the company. In October 2015, she submitted an 8-page proposal for reformation to the chair of FIFA's Reform Committee. This proposal detailed how women in FIFA are unrepresented and how women's soccer is underfinanced. She also provides a solution. Has a solution been reached? It's too soon to say. Moya Dodd's efforts and the U.S. team's efforts were both very recent. These issues were recently brought up because of the 2015 World Cup, so it should take some time before they're solved. To conclude my project, I'd like to state my own personal view. I believe that regardless of gender, men and women should be treated equally based off of their performance and the amount of revenue they bring in. Men shouldn't get special treatment and neither should women. They should both get equal treatment. I think that FIFA, US soccer, and really organizations everywhere need to stop thinking about players as men and women and instead need to think of them as people.